Full-time attendance at schools begins across the country today after almost 2 years of rotational timetables. And this comes as Cabinet approved changes to Alert Level 1 of the COVID-19 regulations and scrapped the 1 meter social distancing provision in schools. But how should parents, perhaps pupils as well, teachers too, navigate this new normal? Well, UNISA Psychology of Education Chair is Professor Ramodungoane Tabane, who joins us now via our telephone line for a sense of how we should approach this moment. Prof, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks so much, as always, for making time. You know, I wonder what kind of pedagogical changes do you think need to take place? Changes around how even teaching occurs in a context where, you know, so much time has been spent before all pupils were back in class.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Clearly, you're quite correct. There is an issue that needs to be attended to in terms of the content gap that is missing. And teachers are trained in terms of pedagogical means and orientations and all that to ensure that they are able to bring in the pre-information and pre-knowledge that should be there. But unfortunately, we're having this 2 year that was totally disrupted. So now teachers are to be in the mindful of that. Parents are to be in the mindful of that. And it's almost like starting afresh, that I'm having a child here who had some disruption for the past 2 years in his or her learning. So therefore, how do I bring the pre-knowledge, the pre-information that the child already has, or the assumed knowledge that should be there, and check what is the baseline of what should be there and it's not there, so that that's where they are supposed to start.
Yeah, you speak about essentially starting from scratch. You know, my heart really goes out to the younger pupils in our country who, ironically, will be for the first time at school seeing its full capacity, for lack of a better term. It almost feels like for them, this is the real first day of school. How should teachers respond to that?
Yes, like you say, it will look like it's their first day of school. Remember that we are coming from a heightened, hypersensitive environment where we were told how not to engage and how not to interact with our fellow learners and our fellow colleagues and all that. So everything is happening, and then we just need to take a step by step. Teachers need to know that learners will come to them with stories from their background, from their home, in terms of COVID-19, in terms of how it is transmitted. Families started to have their own way of developing their own means of protecting each other against the spread. So all of this now needs to be normalized and be brought into, now we are in the same classroom. Now this is what needs to happen going forward.
Yeah. You know, so much time was spent yesterday when the minister was giving her briefing, speaking about how she's going to recapacitate some of her staff members, because obviously many have been lost to the COVID-19 pandemic, sadly. And it made me think just about the sense of trauma and loss that not only pupils might be feeling as we return to full-time learning, but some of the teachers as well. Difficult to navigate in a context where, quite frankly, we haven't been here before.
More so that stats will tell us the ones that have passed on were the elderly. Now, those were the ones with institutional knowledge and experience in terms of especially teaching the young ones and the patience that they had. And now they have to recapacitate. Look, they have the Department of Education has an opportune time here that we are having and we are producing as UNISA quite a sizable qualified teachers now, and they are not employed, or we lost them to other private institutions now in terms of trainings and all. How do we now get the teachers back into the classroom? The usage of the teaching assistants. Who are these teaching assistants? Are they qualified teachers and now we are using them as teaching assistants, or are they just people who do not have qualifications but they are now being employed as teaching assistants? So those teaching assistant posts, they can be used to benefit the teaching, enhance the learning in the classroom by employing properly qualified teachers into those teaching assistant posts.
Yeah, of course, affairs at schools, for lack of a better term, don't involve only what's taking place inside the classroom. It's also about what happens when, you know, the teaching isn't taking place. I'm thinking, for instance, about how schools should be responding to break time, for argument's sake, a context where children typically don't think of restricting themselves in any way. I haven't been able to wrap my head around how schools should approach that. Do you have any ideas?
Look, playtime is a time where learning actually happens uninhibited and unplanned, and it's a free play, it's a free learning environment. And this is where now we allow learners to be able to explore with their environment and with each other in terms of what affects me in a negative way when you say what, or what affirms me in a positive way when I do what. So all that happens. Unfortunately, now we are living in this, coming from this COVID-19 environment, where now they all have to wear masks. Somebody must be on the ground. It is happening in some schools. There is always a teacher on the ground to make sure that kids don't fight. So now those teaching assistants as well can go there and assist and make sure that kids maintain and adhere to COVID-19 regulations in terms of having masks on, washing their hands, and making sure that when they sneeze within an elbow and all that. So there always has to be an adult to make sure that when that play, when that interactions happen, they happen within the ambits of protection.
You know, what I also found interesting from what the minister announced yesterday was this idea of mask breaks. In case you missed it, essentially the minister said what they're going to try and phase in is a moment every 2 hours for pupils to be able to take off their mask for about 5 to 10 minutes. I mean, with the line of work you've been able to do you think that will be helpful in at least helping teachers and pupils connect? A connection, by the way, which often takes place through eye contact, the reading of lips, etc., etc. Difficult to pull that off if you've got a mask on.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge, but it can be learned. Remember that I think the idea of this is to create a certain new way of doing things, that you have to wear masks and then we have to have breaks, new routine. So once that routine gets into the knowledge and into the system, it might be easy to do. I mean, the changing of masks can happen between when teachers changes classes or when learners changes classes. So there is that indication of where it can happen. Whether it should be after 2 hours and they'll say, let's stop teaching, and then it's mask off time, I don't know. But it is a matter of creating and including new routine. Like I say, we know that teachers changes classes from one class to the next, and therefore learners change classes during that time. That can be, it can be monitored and made sure that that happens then, and then we try to see if we will pull it off. But it's difficult. It's difficult to really get our small children in foundation phase to understand that it's time for this and it's time for that. We shall see how it works. I don't know. I'm looking at this with interest.
Absolutely.
It's another paper that can be written, by the way.
Several papers, might I add. And no easy answers, without a doubt. Thanks, nonetheless, for taking a jab at it. Really do appreciate your insights this morning. That, of course, is Professor Ramodungoane Tabane, who's joining us via our telephone line. He's UNISA's chair for the School of Psychology. I beg your pardon. He's the chair of Psychology of Education at UNISA.